Hi there, this is Jacqueline with Honestly Beef. I wanted to do a little video today and talk about roast. I get a lot of questions at farmers markets about the different types of roast and how you cook them and that sort of thing. Everybody always says to me at the farmers market, I don't know what roast I get, I just always pick one. And so I usually guide people based on a few questions that I ask them of the outcome that they want for the roast. So I just wanted to talk about how I cook them. I'm no chef by any means, so I possibly could be telling you something wrong, but this is just based on the things that I've learned about cooking roast and how good they turn out. So we're going to start with the top round roast. This one is 3.34 pounds. Most of the top rounds are about 3 to 5 pounds. One of the things I always ask people when they talk about not knowing what type of roast to pick is it's all about the outcome, how it's going to be cooked for you at the end. So I always ask people, do you want a fall apart kind of roast, or do you want a sliced roast beef sandwich type of roast? So this one would be the sliced roast beef sandwich type of roast. It's gonna slice up, kind of a, stay together kind of deal. If you do not cook it low and slow, then it will be a little on the tougher side. You can't rush it or to be tough. This would be another cut that would be very good for jerky. So if you were trying to make some jerky, that would be your one of your picks for roast. Next one would be a bottom round roast. This one is 2.70. So this would be basically the same. Normally these would be about 2.5 to 3 pounds, not quite as big as the top round roast. Now this one is going to be a fall apart kind of roast. You have this fat cap on the bottom. I always tell everybody to put the fat cap down when you're putting it in the crock pot, so the fat on that edge keeps the meat from drying out in the crock pot, because you also want to do this one low temperature for a long period of time. I usually do my roast, I'm always busy doing other things, so I normally put a roast in the crock pot and don't eat it till maybe start it that morning and eat it for supper that night. I even will sometimes take it and not even eat it to the next night, because a lot of times I'll be in the kitchen doing stuff and then go, this will be good. I'll go ahead and start a meal while the kitchen's already messy and it'll be for tomorrow night. So I'll just cook it all night long, and that morning just pull the cord, unplug the crock pot, leave the top on it, and we'll kind of munch on it all day long. So it sometimes doesn't even make it to supper. But this is the bottom round, so it's going to be a fall apart kind of roast. All right, so the next roast we're going to talk about is the eye of round, which is basically the center. And it's usually kind of like a little circle, looks like an eye, a center of the big cut of meat. It'll a lot of times have this fat cap on there. This is another really good one to make jerky. It is also going to be one of those sliced roast beef sandwich type of roast. It's not going to be a fall apart. So same thing applies with that fat cap. When you're putting it in the crock pot, you would always want to start it out down so it keeps the meat nice and moist. The next one we're going to talk about is a sirloin tip roast. This one's 2.94 pounds. That's about average for a sirloin tip. Maybe a little bigger depending on the cow, but usually 3 to 4 pounds. This is when they are cutting the top sirloin steaks, and they're cutting all the different steaks. At the end they get, it's not going to be pretty steak, obviously the sirloin tip. This one, same thing, cook it low and slow. It'll be a good fall apart roast for you to be real good and tender. It is one of the cuts that if I have a person who's maybe a young person not experienced with cooking or asks my opinion, I will lead them towards this sirloin tip roast, because it's just one of those you can't mess up, and it's going to be a good fall apart, and the meat's going to be great, and they're gonna think that they're an expert chef or something because you just can't screw it up. So here's some little dark spots on this. A lot of people might freak out about that. It's just like, maybe it was a bruise on the animal or something, kind of like a blood bruise when you have it under your arm. You bruise and it's just kind of real dark for a while, so there's no telling, but it's nothing to be concerned about. If you were just worried about it, you could cut it out, but it's nothing to it. The next one will be the shoulder roast. This is my absolute favorite. Until I started selling meat at the farmer's market, I really didn't know about the shoulder roast either. But as I've cooked them all over and over again, I've realized that the shoulder is extremely tender. You cannot mess it up. And so I questioned the processor one time. I said, what is up with the shoulder? Why is it so tender? So basically it is a muscle of the animal. It was worked every time they walked. And so it was just worked a whole lot during its lifetime. So that's why it gets so tender. This is another one that's going to be a fall apart type roast. This is, I don't have just an abundance of these, but when I have these, this is the one I'm going to send a young person to, or an experienced person cooking, and say the shoulder, because it is my absolute favorite. If you've met me at a farmer's market, you know that I will kind of guide you toward that. A lot of times I'm out of them and I'm telling them about the shoulder roast, and I realize, I go to the freezer and I realize that I'm out of them because I push them so much. And then I tell them, hey, next time, see if I have a shoulder roast, that'll be the one. And people now come back telling me they had never cooked a shoulder roast. It was the best thing they'd ever tried, and that's what they got, their go-to roast. You see this stamp here. That is a USDA stamp that they stamp on the meat when it has been processed at a federally inspected plant. So just to talk about that a little bit, there are two types of processing plants that I could use: a state inspected plant or a federal inspected plant. The federal inspected plant allows me to be able to sell across state lines, sell to restaurants and grocery stores, butcher shops. If I were to get the meat processed at a state inspected plant, I would only be able to sell within the state of Mississippi. And I, have my website, and I want to be able to ship across state lines. Another thing that is a peace of mind for me on using that federal inspected plant is if they are open and processing meat, there has to be a federal guy standing there watching over the operations. So if they're processing my meat and there's a guy standing over their shoulder, the employees are going to be on the best behavior and following all the sanitation rules and that sort of thing. So it is a peace of mind to know that it was processed at a federally inspected plant. So we're talking about the chuck roast, the beloved chuck roast. Everybody knows the chuck roast is going to be the best. People who don't know anything about it, they've just heard, or they know their mother or their grandmother says chuck roast. Let me explain to you why. So on the chuck roast, the marbling is all throughout the meat. If you notice some of these other roasts we had, I talked about the fat cap, that fat edge on one side. So the marbling is what gives it the flavor, and all throughout the meat it's going to be just marbled within. Marbling is the key word there. So it's going to have a lot of flavor. On a chuck roast, if you rush it, if you cook it at a higher temperature, if you try to rush it and cook it too fast, it will be tough on you. It is a fall apart kind of roast, but you've got to cook it low and slow. The flavor will be phenomenal because of all the marbling within. But if you don't rush the shoulder roast and the bottom round, really any of them, with that fat cap, then it'll be the same flavor. You're getting, a cap of a cap of fat, and you're just getting it marbled within. So when I say a younger person that comes up to me that asks what roast to buy and they don't know what to do, the reason I don't suggest the chuck it will have a better outcome if they cook it right. But if they don't remember what I said or don't listen to the way, this one will be tough, and they may not come back just because they cooked it wrong, and they'll blame it on the meat. So that's why I always suggest those other cuts for somebody who's inexperienced. But a chuck roast it will have the best flavor. I'd like to introduce my camera and lighting crew tonight. Caroline Rogers was my lighting specialist. Come, Caroline. And Madeline helped me with the video, and she's also going to be my editor. Till next time.
Bye, local.
Oh, that's going to be good.
Yeah, let's watch it.
Yeah, let's watch it.